I am Air Commodore Aerospace, a fighter pilot who spent about 34 years flying different fighters. And now I am in Center for Aircraft Studies. And today with me, this team panel, I have Group Captain Pandey, who's an ISR expert, Wing Commander Aerospace, who's an air defense controller and expert in the drone warfare and airborne warning control radars. And Group Captain Anand Rao, again a fighter pilot, and he specialized in space. Now today, before I start anything at all, I just want a lot of people to thank right in the beginning, and there are some challenges that I want to lay out. The first person to thank is Gaurav Arya, and who's given the opportunity, and thank you so much for the Chanakya Forum. The next person to thank is General Asosan. He's just left for making my job much easier. He talked about the military diplomacy. I'll talk about the military diplomacy through air. A little bit of it, I'll tell you. And the next person to thank is CEO MD Brahmos, Mr. Arun, who also made my job easier because I don't have to now talk about weapons you already heard about and you've seen the live demonstration of the destruction that weapon can cause and gives you the advantage over the thing. Challenges that we are already about 30 minutes late. That too at the end of the day. So to keep you glued to us and listen to us with attention and finish it in time, that is the next challenge. But I'll show you we'll finish in time so that you are not stuck in traffic. All right, now coming to this, how the Air Force panned out, the topic today of discussion is Rising India and Rising India Aerospace Power. And that is what the main thing is. Before I begin anything else, last thing I want to thank was my own Indian Air Force. Because that they made today's job much easier by what has happened just yesterday night. Yesterday midnight, there was a massive evacuation carried out from Sudan, which you all are aware. And this evacuation was the most audacious in my entire service career. I'll tell you why. Evacuation that was carried out was not normal daylight evacuation with the aircraft goes. There are people to welcome, lined up and then go. What happened yesterday, it had to be done in an airstrip, which was a disused airstrip. It didn't have any landing facilities. It did not even have the runway lights available. It did not have the fire safety hazard assistance. And it did not have any refueling capability. With all these odds against, we had to evacuate people. And look at the pilots what they did. They used the night vision goggles, IRFR, and landed perfectly on the night. Thank you so much for encouraging the Air Force. Garuds came out, sanitized the airspace around area. 120 people, Indians, most of them were pregnant women, senior citizens, and some children. They were all brought in, and within a short time, it took off to the skies and landed back safely. Today, they all are in India. That is what the capability today we have in Air Force, and that is what is Rising Air Force all about, and that is what exactly military deployment. It sends a very strong signal across the world. I'll tell you, when I was a youngster in 1985, I started my flying career. My first lecture which I had to give was on Osirak nuclear reactor attack by Israelis. It was one of the perfect attack carried by Israeli Air Force, and the next thing I heard was the Entebbe operation by the Israeli Air Force. I was in awe as to what kind of Air Force is this that carries out such absolute perfect operations and nobody can touch them. And today, I can tell you with confidence that we are well ahead of the Israeli Air Force today, and we have gone past that. That is the Rising India. The Indian Air Force has always come up to the challenges that are posed, and they are unprecedented challenges. Within 1 year of our independence, in 1948, we had the so-called Kabbalists about to take over the J&K sector, cut off the J&K from India, Kashmir Valley. And that is where the Indian Air Force came to rescue and gave a winning hammer. Air Commodore then, Baba Meher Singh, rose to the occasion, took his Dakota aircraft, flew the 1/6 regiment from Jammu to landed Srinagar airfield through the Pir Panjal ranges, which are higher than the capacity of the aircraft. Through the valley, through all the dangerous routes he flew and landed them there. And the 1/6 regiment thereafter was able to save the Srinagar airfield. The best example of the joint operations and the kind of capability that we even possessed that time. From there, we have come a very long way. You all must have witnessed the Kargil warfare. Our army was stuck very badly. There was a lot of opposition, Enemy was sitting on the higher heights, and army didn't know how to counter. We were losing a lot of jawans. And that's where once again air came to rescue. Our Mirage 2000s, they carried out the precision attack with precision bombings and destroyed Tiger Hill and Mantodhalo. Both of them fell, and that was the end of the Kargil war, and we were winning. That is how the air power, insurgent air power, and that's what we are going to talk about. Not only this, I've given you an example of the various warfare, where other roles the Air Force has always been participating, and the diplomacy that General Atal Hussain talked about. The most famous case is the vaccine diplomacy, where the 108 nations were given the vaccine by the our aircraft, which moved to various countries during the period of pandemic, with pilots taking all the risk of reaching those nations and carried out. The world has acknowledged it, WHO has acknowledged the capability. Along with that, if you all remember what happened in Delhi, there was a huge shortage of oxygen, and the oxygen tankers were brought in from various countries and brought in short time. And that is what the capability today we have. And we are going to move even further. Brahmos already told you what weapon capability we have. I am also talking the capability otherwise in HADR mission. Whether it was the water shortage in Maldives, overnight we provided about 3,000 liters of tons of water, or the Ukraine, where the war started and our students were stuck, medical students, all of them were, not even one chap was left. Everybody was brought in. So this is the entire gambit of the Indian Air Force, rising Aerospace India. And obviously, air is not the only domain, aerospace is the complete domain. For this, that's why I have the panel with me, and we are going to discuss few issues. Since space is the overarching over us, it's an umbrella, and it's right that we start from space and come down back to the closer air. So I will actually invite Anand Rao to tell us that does he see the India becoming a global space power in the present day, the way space is growing, the space assets are growing, space is a focus. Today, you'll see large number of things happening in the space. A lot of companies have come in, private companies have come in. Ukraine war showed us that how it was used, Starlink was used for providing information to the Ukraine forces, how it was effectively used, there are large number of issues. So I will request Anand Rao to tell us about as to is India going to become a global space power, and what do we need to do about it? Over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I think India is already a global space power. If you look at the global space rankings, India ranks 5th or 6th in the global space rankings. But it's not just the statistics. If we have to tick certain check boxes to say that we are a global space power. And what are these check boxes? One, I'll say launch capability. India does have a decent launch capability. We'll not go into how many rockets we can launch and what weight we can carry into space. But we are one of the few countries which has a launch capability, and that itself is an achievement. We can make our own satellites. That's a big achievement. We have a booming private industry which manufactures satellites and contributes to space services. We are using space services in a very big way, even in the armed forces. We have our own navigation satellites, the IRNSS. We have an indigenous capability for ISR, that is intelligence, surveillance and reconnaissance through Earth imaging satellites. And we have our own communication satellites. So the entire gamut of space services, India has its own capability to be called a global space power. And beyond the satellites, we have also gone beyond the orbital space into deep space, where we have done missions to the moon, the Chandrayaan 1 and 2, and the 3, which is going to be shortly coming. And even to Mars. In fact, we have gone to Mars before China also. So all these activities say that we are actually a global space power. And now that we have reached here, we have to move ahead in this chain of hierarchy. And to do that, there are two very important things. Firstly, we need to have space technology, and we need to keep upgrading our space technology, and which ISRO is doing a very wonderful job in this. And along with that, we also need to have a space economy to drive the space technology, because both are complementary to each other. So space technology drives the economy, and the economy drives the technology. And both a nation which has both these can be called to be having a space superiority. At the same time, it's not just enough to have space superiority, because there are threats and hazards in space. We do need to deal with the threats of the adversaries, and therefore a certain measure of space defense capabilities are also required, which is also called a space control. So a nation which has space defense capabilities will be able to maintain the space superiority. And when you have both these, then there is a certain degree of space dominance that can be achieved.
I think that's absolutely right. Can you all hear me? Yeah. Okay, I think this is very well conveyed to this. But I must bring it to the focus to the once again what the IF is all about. You know, the military organizations are about the safeguarding the sovereignty of the nation. And IAF per se is for targeting. That means what the army and the navy cannot reach, Air Force has a reach, can reach farthest of the targets, fly down there and destroy the targets. So the enemy back is broken. Now for these things, for doing a targeting, what I understand is the most important thing is the information, that you must have correct intelligence, and that intelligence is gathered through various means. And the assets in the air, which can give you the information, are very important. They can give you timely information, they can give you accurate information, they can give you continuous update about enemy disposition. Now for these things, space-based assets become very important. And the ISR, intelligence, surveillance and recce, these three portions become very, very important. And for this, I'll invite Group Captain Pandey to tell us something about as to with the two enemies, that is to our north, northeast and west. We have a large land area to be covered, as well as now the Indo-Pacific becoming a major challenge, where the large oceanic areas to be covered, and China is expanding its feet over there. So, what kind of ISR capabilities do we have, and how do you think we are going to utilize these facilities in the future war?
Thank you, sir. ISR has been defined as intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, and it takes us to the targeting part of Indian Air Force, as we are known for the targeting. Now, as we say intelligence, it is all-inclusive intelligence, which could be from air and which could be from space. As you know that we are growing from air part to aerospace part, so our aim is to take this capability from air to space. As of now, we have a lot of capability in air regarding collection of intelligence, all air assets, whether it is fighter aircraft, whether it is unmanned aircraft, or whether it is any other sensor which is available to us. Now we want to take this further to space so that we can have the enhanced range, or maybe we can, in military terms, we can call this at this strategic depth. So when we call this as strategic depth, then as is being said, the air intelligence platform have a limited kind of range and capability. But then as we take it to the space, it increases multifold. So if we take this Pakistan challenge or China challenge or Indo-Pacific challenge, then certainly we cross this China challenge and this Indo-Pacific challenge and the Pakistan challenge. And once we take all these things to space, we have all the capabilities. Now, I'll give you some example of how this thing works. In Ukraine war, you must have seen, because it is the latest example which is now available. So how does this intelligence comes to us? So if you have heard that in Ukraine, you have attack wherein the Russian forces were attacked tracking their mobile phones. So this is also a kind of RF intelligence which is available to the forces by tracking the mobile phones. Mind you, all of you sitting here, including us, are being known, our location is known at every times, and that is why this problem of location and in sensitive areas, these mobile phones are not permitted. So this is the kind of capability we have. Now, once we know the exact location, we can easily task our aircrafts or missiles or whatever things we have to target the targets available, whether it is east, whether it is west, or whether it is Indo-Pacific. So this is the kind of capability we have, and we will continue to grow further as we grow from air power to aerospace power.
Thank you so much. I think this is we have come down to the crux that I was talking about, targeting. Now, Ukraine war has, if you all have been following, has opened up a lot of aspects of the air war which is going on. And it is not only space which has taken the dominant portion and all in the war, but the drones have come to play a major role. And drones have really become the major warfare instrument. Main thing is that they are very small, non-detectable, and they can be operated easily and very low cost option. The cost is also not much, and they can carry some weapons. They can become a kamikaze drone. They can go and hit the target themselves, and they can be controlled from anybody with little problem running. So unlike the air power where you require aircrafts to be trained, pilots have to be trained for almost 5-6 years and they become operational, here it is not the requirement. So very quickly can be trained. So similar thing, Indian Air Force has also got into this much earlier and it's into the drone. So I'll request Vinkar especially to tell us where do we stand in terms of drones for the Air Force is concerned in targeting, and how are you utilizing drones in India? What is the future? If you can just
Thank you, sir. Journey of drone for Indian Air Force started almost 2 decades by now. And we have been dependent upon equipments from Israel. Recently, if you have seen in the last 2-3 years, there has been a top-down approach by the government and none other than the Prime Minister himself. And because of which we have seen a huge proliferation of drone in India. Government has released this drone liberalization policy in 2021. So this has actually opened market for the commercial use. That is one. And second is that there is a very huge awareness amongst the academia, industry and business people that drone is one equipment which can make wonders. Now, coming on to the military aspect of it, there have been a few wars in the recent past where a drone has been used phenomenally, and more than that, the narrative of drone has gone, at much higher scale. But it also has got, both pros and cons. If we say that only drones will change the character of warfare or future war fighting mechanism, it is not. Drone could create, a nuisance for one particular purpose. But drone replacing the manned fighters or drone replacing other potent equipments what conventionally a Air Force operates, that will not happen. Drone, there is another concept which is coming and every Air Force is now trying to practice is of man-unmanned teaming, MUMT. So that is one way where Air Force is also looking at, industry is helping us, that how these drones can be clubbed together with manned fighters in our combined, offensive counter-air operations. So Indian Air Force is also working on that. For Air Force, another point what is important is that drone is used for ISR as described by previous speaker. Drone is a very potent platform to get that because our manned aircraft cannot remain on station for long, whereas drone has the capability. Drone also has got certain characteristics as per height, that is they are high altitude drones, medium altitude drones, which is required for a continental size of country like us. Indian Air Force and rather Indian Navy also, Army, Tri-Services, we are procuring a whole lot of drones in these categories. And I think next few years we will see mass induction of these.
Very nice. Thank you so much. And actually, what you brought up a very important point is that drone itself will not be the only portion that will be taking part. They cannot replace the manned fighter and all. So obviously, Air Force has had to concentrate not only on the drones, but also on the fighters, transport, helicopters, everything which is a war-waging machinery. And during the war, during the operations, it will be a kind of net-centric warfare. So communication will play a major role. ISR, as brought up in player, space assets will play a role. And all of this will be combined together through a secure communication sort of weapons and carried out. Now, this particular thing, so as far as the fighters are concerned, like till late, we were all dependent on the fighters from the various countries, friendly countries, that's Russia, USA, France, and UK to some extent. And this is how we have been inducting. The latest induction was Rafale, which is one from France. Definitely, yes, it is good to have the aircraft from there. But what happens is during operations, once you have the war and all, you are fully dependent on the maintenance support as well as the weapons coming from those countries. So if they have different alignment at that time when you are in war, obviously your supply chain will stop. And this is what is the biggest bugbear. So for this, the entire initiative given by our Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, Atmanirbhar, is the soul of this. And that's what has moved forward. Even IAF has taken leaps and bounds in this Atmanirbhar. We now have the LCA, Light Combat Aircraft Tejas, which is indigenous built for last about 20 years and is now operational in Air Force. So 2 of these cons are there, and another 2 years we'll have 84 more aircrafts, which are there in the annual, and we'll have about at least 8 squadrons of the LCA with us. Similarly, Navy has gone in for the LCA. LCA Mark II, which are a higher version, has come up. We are also working for AMCA, which is Advanced Military Combat Aircraft. The design is already frozen. So by 2025, even that will start coming up. And as far as the helicopters are concerned, combat helicopters, just last September, our Honorable Raksha Mantri Rajnath Singh ji has handed over the aircraft Prachand, that is a light combat helicopter, to the Air Force, and large number have been inducted in Air Force as well as the Army. And they're going to be the mainstay. As far as the replacement of Mi-17 fleet is concerned, look at the way Russia is at war. So a lot of supply chain problems have come up. So this is going to be replaced gradually by indigenous aircraft. So similarly, transport aircraft, all this will happen. Air defense also will play a major role. The eyes in the sky, they play a major role in controlling the war from there. Radars will play a major role to give you the right information about the enemy. And all this is how it's very well integrated. That is what is of essence. So for eyes in the air, as far as the DRDO has done a good job, they have developed the aircraft Netra, which is on the Embraer aircraft. We have developed our own airborne early warning control system, which is almost indigenous, not completely indigenous, but it is doing a good job. Along with that, we have the airborne control radar systems, AVACS. And I'll request Wing Commander to talk something about the AVACS and AEW as to how do they assist us.
Yes, sir, this is a very important assets of Air Force, and when we speak of air power only, not going to space, I think eye in the sky, AVACS is the thing. And one important aspect I want to bring out here in this audience, that so far there has been understanding that AVACS, which has the ability to look into deep into the enemy airspace, is a support element to our main war fighting. From there, then people graduated that, okay, from support it has become enabler of air operations. But it is not so. AVACS, which has got tremendous potential not only for surveillance, for controlling, it also has got tremendous potential for online networking, ELINT, SIGINT, COMINT. So these actually makes AVACS as a orchestrator of air operations. So I want to bring that point, very important point, which should be driven to the industry and to concerned people, that it is no more enabler, this is orchestrator. As far as Indian effort is concerned, DRDO has made Netra, which is already in service, and they are also making another 6-7 aircraft, which is information is available in open media. But AEWNC, Netra, that is called Airborne Early Warning and Control, this is a limited version of AVACS. AVACS has got the capability of 360-degree around with active airborne radars, whereas AEWNC has got limited of 240-degree or something like that. So it is very important that our industry must also look into this aspect, and we need to have more number of AVACS as compared to AEW. So present inventory, whatever we have for the continental size of our country, we require something around, if we multiply by 5 times or so, that is the requirement which is with.
I think you're absolutely right. And you brought out a very important point that this, what we are talking about, the airborne warning control system and the enablers are in the air power domain. The main overarching is the aerospace. And there's been a lot of talk about the militarization of the aerospace. And huge amount of things are going on in the space. From the earlier talk about it's for peaceful use, and ISRO was working throughout for peaceful use of the space, has now changed dimension. And like it was brought up by Gopi Pandey also, that the Ukraine warfare has brought to the forefront that how the space has been used effectively for the warfare. So militarization of space is one of the major worry, and obviously India has to rise to that challenge. We have to make sure that we are defending. Gupi Rao had brought out we must have the space defense capability and space offense. So may I request you to kindly just tell about how the Indian Air Force is working towards militarization of the airspace and what are our capabilities and what are we doing in future?
I think we must first realize that space is a strategic domain, and everything beyond designated orbits are actually a military domain. Space has already been militarized, not now, but towards the end of the Second World War itself, when the V2 rocket was launched. That was in fact the first weapon that went through space. And subsequently, all the technology developments that have taken place were all towards the military utilization. And the armed forces across the world have got more and more dependent on these space services for their operational functioning as well as routine functioning. And what are these services? They are the navigation, the ISR that he talked about for targeting, the communication services, weather predictions, and so many more, early warning. These are all services available through satellites which have proliferated into the armed forces, and armed forces have become dependent on these services. And therefore, that has also created a vulnerability. And vulnerability in terms of anti-satellite weapons. The genesis of anti-satellite weapons is to degrade the functioning of the militaries who use satellites for space services. Therefore, there is a threat to our space assets. There is a threat to freedom of operations in space. And that's where the armed forces also have to step in. So the armed forces in general will broadly have two roles. One is the enabling function, where they use these space services for their targeting and other requirements. And the other is a securing function, where we need to secure our assets in space from enemy action. And both these have to be done by the armed forces. And the Air Force has a major role to play here, because anything that goes in space has to go through the airspace. And air and space are a contiguous medium. And therefore, it would be apt to call the Air Force as an aerospace force.
Absolutely. I think very rightly brought out, and you brought out the threat to the assets that is there. China had already demonstrated ASAT capability, anti-satellite capability, and that's what the main threat is we have to worry about. Shifting a little bit from here, like we come back to the ISR, which is space assets have to give us the right amount of information in time and accurate information. So recently, the space policy has been just launched, Space Policy 2023. Gupi Pandey, how has it helped us, the IAF especially, in getting the ISR ecosystem in place? Will we be benefited from it, or is there something more to be done about it? Just kindly speak about it.
As you said, sir, this Indian Space Policy 2023 has just been announced, and basically it gives an impetus to the things which we use in, especially in ISR. You all must be knowing that ISR is basically imaging of the Earth, or we call it Earth observation. So it is heavily dependent upon the resolution of the sensor which is available on the spacecraft. And once we have a better resolution in our pocket, we have a better picture of the enemy, and we have a better targeting capability to the Air Force. So what is this space policy does is it gets to us a very, very fine resolution, which I am not telling here, but then although it is an open domain, but then it takes us to a very, very fine resolution, which gives us a very good potency to first image, and then target the enemy at all times. And the beautiful thing which has been done is, till now, generally it was in government control, but then now it has been opened up to the private industry, so that in case private industry wants to invest or develop or do some kind of joint venturing and some kind of R&D, then it is available to the private industry. And we have seen that once it is opened up to the private industry, the technology comes fast and easy. So this is what Indian space policy gives us in the ISR domain.
Absolutely right. Now, remaining on space, which is obviously the mainstay aerospace part, one of the major things, Gupi Rao, that we see is that every country today is launching satellites, and whole number of satellites now, it has gone multiplied by almost tens and twenties. So with so many satellites over there, is there any kind of regulation? Is there kind of traffic, space traffic management? And how is it being done? If you could just throw some light on it, that'll be nice. And this will be last question before we wind up. Thank you so much.
I think you're absolutely right, sir. The traffic in space is increasing and increasing rapidly. And just 3 years ago, there were less than 2,000 satellites in space, but today there are more than 5,000 satellites. And there is an estimate that in the next 10 years, or rather in this decade itself, there will be at least 1 lakh satellites in space, and that's because a lot of small satellites are being put up, and they're calling them mega constellations. And the Starlink of SpaceX is one example. There'll be many more which will come. So the traffic in space is definitely going to increase, and we need to be prepared for it. Now, how are these objects which go into space controlled? As of now, there is no management of space traffic, but there are regulations. And these regulations are basically to control the traffic, which is being done by the ITU, the International Telecom Union, a UN body, as well as the UN COPUS, the United Nations Office of Outer Space Affairs. They both combine and control, and the active control part is being done by the Space Operations Center of the US Space Force. So now space traffic management is an evolving phenomena, and there are hectic discussions going on in the UN on how do we manage the space traffic. And to understand space traffic management, we need to look ahead at least 10 years from now, what kind of traffic is going to be there. Today, we don't see more than one rocket being launched from any part of the world, but it is predicted that there will be multiple rockets being launched from various parts of the globe in future. There will be space planes which will be taking off from runways, flying in the airspace, going into space, coming back, landing back on runways. Aeroplanes will go higher altitudes. There will be balloons which will be going to higher altitudes. There will be UAVs which will be going to much higher altitudes. And there are pseudo satellites, and there's a huge suborbital region which has been unexplored. So the traffic within the airspace, which extends up to 100 kilometers, is definitely going to increase. And even in the orbital region, we have seen the orbital satellites numbers will increase. So how do you control all this is an issue which is under deliberations, but it's not possible for one control center in the US to manage all this. There will be a requirement of regional centers to manage the space traffic. And there's an opportunity for India here, because India being in a geographically an ideal position to take on this responsibility when regional space traffic management centers may be set up. So this is an opportunity which India has to explore, and especially for the Indian Air Force, this is an opportunity. So it's actually not space traffic management, it has to be air and space traffic management which has to come up, because there'll be a lot of traffic within the airspace and the suborbital region also.
Absolutely right, and thank you so much. And in the last about compressed time frame of about 25-30 minutes, we have tried to cover almost the entire gamut of the aerospace warfare rather, for you, and give you the glimpse of what the Air Force, your IF capabilities are, both in times of peace and war. And obviously, what we see visibly most of the time is the peace warfare, as I covered the HADR missions and the airlifting of various people, vaccine diplomacy. But just to assure audience, everybody else, especially the younger lot, IF has come a long way, and especially with this Atmanirbhar initiative, we are moving very fast in terms of self-reliance. And soon we'll have a very formidable force technology we already have. Our pilots are well trained. We carry out a large number of international exercises with various countries like Australia, US, UK, France, Sweden, as well as Singapore, and ongoing. These are ongoing exercises, we keep them. Our pilots are well trained and very well exposed to various things. Aerospace already been covered as to how the space is going to cover the thing. Future warfare are going to be drone warfare, space warfare, and obviously net-centric warfare at the level of the ACARS. And this is how going the whole gambit will be. But to assure everyone else, IF is fully capable to undertake any challenge as it was there even in 1947. With this, we come to the end of the session, and I think we have time for just about 2 questions before Mera Gaurav gives me dirty looks. So just 2 questions. Okay. He's already giving me details. He sent me slips. Don't worry. Sir, we had just 2 minutes. Sorry, 4 minutes. 2 questions. Yeah. Thank you so much. Yeah. Any questions you have? Yeah, please. Sir, I'll answer. Sir, let him first finish. Youngster.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, please.
Hi, sir. Manish here from Hypersci. My question is regarding AVAX. So, between 2012 and 2015, we heard a lot of chatter and discussion among defense forums regarding AVAX and Netra program. However, after it's like 8 to 10 years, and we haven't heard much development. So, is it a strategic decision to not go with, be it IL-76 with Israeli radars, or is it a focus on going with Netra program with smaller aircrafts?
So, every Air Force would like to have as many AVACs as possible, and so is the case with IAF. IAF had moved a proposal to get AVACs under AVACs India project, but because of prioritization or budgetary constraints, that could not move ahead. So, and thereafter this Atmanirbharta thing has come. So, India is moving ahead, and our main concentration as of now is to get AEW from DRDO. The concern with IL-76 aircraft, you are well aware that it is an old aircraft, and Russia-Ukraine conflict is telling us that one has to be self-reliant, we can't be dependent upon spare parts and all. So, having AVACs on a legacy kind of aircraft, it requires a serious brainstorming, and so discussion is there on that. So, we would like to have a better platform for AVACs, and work is on. The work is in progress.
Sir.
Thank you, Air Commodore sir, and your wonderful team. You have brought out things very clearly. But I would like to ask you a small thing. As we know that 100 kilometers is our area over where sovereignty is there of a country. Now, when the space war is taking over, the satellites are there. There will be space stations, and there will be civil traffic. There will be civil, and in case of a conflict. Now, what happens? How do we then decipher what will be the control system where you will control, your space weapon systems not to attack the civil, not to attack the civil satellites, etc. Now, this is going to become a very, very complicated thing. Humanitarian laws will dictate you the laws in attack, the laws in defense. You will have defense in space. So, will that be a study separate? Perhaps I think you will have to create one more directorate to study all that.
Absolutely. Sir, I think Rupi Rao can answer. He's already having a lot of information on that. He'll answer.
Rupi, sir.
The things in airspace are very clear. In sovereign airspace, the air defense takes over all activities. But what is not clear is what is going to happen in space, because whatever you mentioned is all possible. The UN Charter of Self-Defense also is applicable. NATO has declared that if there's any attack on any of their satellites, they have the right to respond. So warfare in space is very much a possibility. None of the existing laws prohibit it. The only thing that is prohibited is use of nuclear weapons in space. Conventional weapons are all, that's an open-ended thing. It's likely to happen anytime.
But nuclear weapon is not banned yet.
Yes.
Not even on ground.
Yes.
In space, it is.
The rule is that within the gamut of humanitarian law, with proportionality, limitation, and unnecessary suffering, commanders they have to use their judgment to use nuclear.
Absolutely. You are very right, sir. This is all, and this is an evolving process, and that person on the spot will have to take a decision based on. Absolutely. You are very right, sir. And with this, we come to the end of this. Gaurav, sir, we are dot on 6 o'clock. To the T, and Air Force has met the target. And thank you so much. I know if there are a lot of other questions people have, only request is we are at Center for APAS Studies. You can all, anytime you are most welcome to visit us, discuss any issue, we'll be more than happy to answer. And thank you for being such a nice audience. Thank you. Thank you so much.